And when you talk about what's happening with the reef, is there the possibility that new species might have made a home around there because of the change in kind of conditions out here?
If you're talking about changes to astrolabe reef, the answer is we don't know. There's always a possibility of it. One of the things that tends to happen when you have very large objects like ships falling down a reef is there's an enormous amount of breakage and scour on the surfaces. When you create that free space, what you tend to see is this massive recruitment, new episodes of organisms settling on the bare surfaces. And so what you have to be aware of, in fact, is that that's a time trajectory, and you just have to follow it and see what happens. Part of the problem with that is that we don't have a lot of data and much visual from that reef yet, so we'll be able to answer some of these questions perhaps after summer.
Can I just perhaps also add that part of the long-term environmental recovery plan includes monitoring for biosecurity incursions. The first results of the survey that had been done in Tauranga Harbour come back saying that there are no new species that have been identified. The second phase is to go out and survey around Motiti and the reef itself. We expect that to be approved next week, and that will take place when the weather conditions permit very soon.
Given the amount of oil that did come ashore and did leak from the ship, are these results that you're getting, these preliminary results, are they surprising?
I suppose they're surprising to us in that you would typically find lots of localized disasters after an oil spill, but there's a couple of things I'd add as a caveat there. This was a big deal for us. It was an outrage, and we all feel it. But in terms of world standards of oil spillages, the Rena oil spill wasn't a huge one, where you have just masses of this stuff piled up on beaches and so on. So I think we were a bit fortunate there. In terms of the results, one of the surprising things to us is, as we go through this scientifically, when you're trying to find standards for this huge family of aromatic hydrocarbons and some of the effects as they might build up through the ecosystem as they feed through the food chain, the standards aren't all that obvious sometimes. So I guess part of the surprise to us is how much we had to discover about our own ecosystems and how this stuff works through, and really develop some of our own standards for acceptability and recovery.
You can make a comparison, and it was useful to do this at the time, with recent Australian events. The Pacific Adventurer lost a similar amount of oil, 350 tonnes, thereabout. They are still experiencing impacts and effects on Moreton Bay and the beaches there. There is different to here. They used, or tried to use, heavy machinery to get the oil off, and it just entrenched, as Catherine Taylor had said on day one, the oil into the sediments there, and that's proved to be a problem.
So in that case, they're now projecting that up to 20 years or so for those beaches to purge themselves and the oil as the water works through the sand grains and that sort of stuff. And that was very much a direct result of the heavy machinery that took down there.
Chris, a question for you, if you don't mind. You're one of the old guard for this, Rena, as some of us here have been around since the very, very early hours. How would you sum up your feelings today, having now been through this whole process of the study and having these results that seem pretty good?
Well, pleased, obviously, and to be honest, a little bit surprised when we were reading the literature that's available internationally around these sorts of spill events. Number one, there was not a heck of a lot of useful information out there, and much of it came from dubious sources, so we're filling in the gaps now, actually. But what was there suggested that there might be slow accumulation of some of these pH compounds, but also slow release of them. The information we have suggests it's not the case at all. That moved very quickly into these animals, but it's come out very quickly as well. Key question, as I said, is to understand whether there's been any legacy, sublethal legacy of that, and that is being determined as we speak with the ongoing monitoring.
How crucial was that baseline that you were able to get in the days before it was there?
Good question. It's unique that there's been an opportunity to establish that baseline. Because as has often been found, and we can look across the Tasman elsewhere around the world, and as Dave has alluded to, the US, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to identify the extent of an impact if you don't know what it should have been like in the first place. So to mount a defensible argument about what the quantum of the impact is, and to be able to identify accurately what the recovery rate is, you need to know what your starting point is, and we have that. Ideally, we could have had more comprehensive data if we'd had a slightly longer calm period after the ship hit the rocks and before those first storms came about, but we at least have something. We're able also to draw on a fairly lengthy time series of information that the Regional Council, City Council and others have generated of the beaches, because they were being monitored every year for some 20 or so years. So that legacy of information is invaluable. So the sorts of graphs that the folks who come along tonight will see, there won't be many of them, but there's one critical one that shows a starting point, what the background is. It shows the peaks during the heavy part of the oil, but it also shows the recovery. And you can quantify that, and you can put some argument about how confident you are that that is real.
And the results are early, but do they show you that you're on the mark with that first group of results that you came up?
Yeah, I think at the time we indicated one of the questions from one of the very first public discussion events at Tauranga Boys Arena, that by Christmas, as far as we knew, without any further compromise of the ship's hull, that we might be in a situation where Whamawana was safe to India, mindful, of course, of other issues like PSP plaguing this region. And that was pretty much on target, apart from one or two areas which appear to funnel in debris in contamination fields. So there are one or two hotspots which, of course, are receiving extra focus at the moment. Just through quirks of the current systems, they seem to attract re-exposure to oil and other debris. And it's not surprising then that we are seeing slightly elevated levels of PAHs in the organisms from those areas.
Where are they?
The Waikato is one area, parts of Matakana Island, central parts of the beach there, and as you might recall, those heavily oiled areas down at Pukemoa. Also, the northeastern point of Motiti Island, as you might expect, close to Aitaiti, Astrolabe Reef, is also being re-exposed to debris.